Hello gamers, and welcome to Origins, where we tell you the stories behind the greatest titles in video game history. In a previous episode, we covered how Blizzard Entertainment rocked the world when they released their real-time strategy game StarCraft and its expansion in the late 90s.
Adjutant online. Good morning, Captain. Our long voyage from Earth is over.
And in this episode, we'll be continuing the story of the franchise, as we share with you exactly how Blizzard managed to bring the iconic game back to life a decade later. I'm Sam Hearn, and this is the story of StarCraft 2. Sequels are infamously hard to pull off, and Blizzard were taking on the mammoth task of trying to create a game that could top arguably their greatest work, StarCraft Brood War. Graphics were of course on their side, as was time. When working on the original StarCraft, Blizzard were under enormous pressure. The E3 reveal trailer in 1996 of their original design using the Warcraft 2 engine had been criticised so heavily that the company ended up starting over. The decision would see the game released in 1998 instead of the end of 1996 as planned. This time around, however, Blizzard were in a good place. By the mid-2000s, Blizzard had not only released the third installment of Warcraft along with an expansion, but had also launched their giant, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, World of Warcraft, to thunderous applause. The sequel to Diablo, released in 2000, was also still a huge success, and Blizzard were a far bigger and more reputable company than they had been in the mid-90s. If they were going to do StarCraft 2, it was inevitably going to be on a grand scale, but first, they would need to modernise the units, buildings, and abilities.
So we started with the StarCraft 1 units. We didn't have any new units.
Blizzard's approach was to first recreate all the models and UI from StarCraft 1 in their brand new StarCraft 2 engine.
We were kind of experimenting with the Terrans at this point.
Video footage of the development history was actually shared in 2011 and showed primitive designs the company had put together in June 2005, 5 whole years before it would eventually hit the shelves.
And this is what creep looks like when you put a bunch of programmers in a room without an artist to actually give them direction.
Blizzard began by working on the Terran first, one of the 3 playable races in the StarCraft universe, and also the first campaign players played in both the original StarCraft and its expansion, Brood War. StarCraft 2 at this point looked very Warcrafty, but within a year, Blizzard had already made huge progress. Particles were added to show blood and gore, the terrain became more complex, and the buildings were becoming more what players would expect from a modern real-time strategy game. By April 2007, the game looked complete to the untrained eye. The Protoss and Terran units and buildings were looking slick, the environment exquisite, and Blizzard seemed to have truly captured the look of the original game while still bringing it up to date. However, until now the game had been completely under wraps. The public had no idea Blizzard was working on the game, but that was about to change.
Blizzard will announce their new game at this stage.
On the 19th of May 2007, at the worldwide Blizzard Invitational in Seoul, South Korea, Blizzard revealed StarCraft 2 to the world.
What game will it be?
I can't say that just yet, you'll have to wait and see, I'm sorry.
South Korea had become the mecca for StarCraft ever since the release of the original game, and seen 3 leagues grace national television. There was no better place to announce it. And who better to introduce it than Mike Morhaime, Blizzard's CEO.
안녕하세요. It is my honor to present to you Blizzard's newest game.
The announcement trailer didn't initially give away what game it was for, and featured a prisoner entering an ominous room. After being locked to the floor, machinery begins gearing him up, and as his blue armor began to take shape, the penny slowly dropped with gamers. This was a Marine, the bread and butter of the Terran army, and as the camera panned up to showcase his spacesuit in its full splendor, there's a flash of Kerrigan, the female villain from the original StarCraft. The English version of the trailer ended with what is now a classic line.
Hell, it's about time.
Pretty exciting stuff, huh?
Epic gameplay footage followed on the giant screen in Seoul, showcasing a colossal fight between a Terran and Protoss army. It showcased the incredible graphics potential of StarCraft's sequel and included new units never seen before. The 4-legged giant laser beam firing Colossus and the Mothership, the most powerful unit in the Protoss arsenal. Suffice to say, minds were blown, and a few months after the reveal trailer and game footage in Seoul, Blizzard showed a playable demo at BlizzCon. The pre-alpha demo gave fans a first look at the impressive new 3D briefing room on the battleship Hyperion, a huge step up from the briefing room in the original StarCraft. The new briefing room would also mark the first appearance of Jim Raynor, an iconic StarCraft hero who fans were delighted to know would once again play a major role. New units were unveiled for the Terran, and Blizzard's senior vice president of game design at the time, Rob Pardo, would reveal in StarCraft 2 players would need to earn money to outfit their battle fleet and unlock new missions. To do so, players would have a choice of which planets to visit via a star map, breaking away from the linear mission progression of the original. The Blizzard Worldwide Invitational and BlizzCon had without question created a buzz around StarCraft 2, and the footage was all very pleasing for both new players and fans of the original. This was of course in stark contrast to the initial reaction by the public and media to the E3 reveal of StarCraft 1 all those years ago. In the summer of 2008, Blizzard finally unveiled what the insectoid alien race known as the Zerg would look like in StarCraft 2, the third and final playable race.
We evolved. Now the time has come for us to step back into the light.
The Zerg were unveiled in a community show match at the Blizzard Worldwide Invitational 2008, the same event the game had been unveiled at a year earlier. Although all 3 races had been showcased to the public, Blizzard's senior vice president of product development Frank Pierce would drop the rather surprising news in an interview with IGN that the game was still only in a limited internal alpha stage, and that the inclusion of external testers was months away. If that didn't take the wind out of gamers' sails, an announcement during BlizzCon's 2008 QA a few months later certainly did. At BlizzCon 2008, Blizzard shared the most shocking news of all, that StarCraft 2, the long-awaited sequel, would actually be a trilogy. Instead of all 3 race campaigns being part of one title, there would be 3 standalone StarCraft 2 titles, each with a different faction's campaign. The first entry in the trilogy would be StarCraft 2, Wings of Liberty, that would feature multiplayer for all 3 races, but would only contain a single-player campaign for Terran.
I want you to see this coming.
You won't find my father here, Commander.
Blizzard went on to announce that the titles of future entries in the trilogy would be StarCraft 2, Heart of the Swarm, which would feature a Zerg campaign, and finally StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void, which would close out the storyline with a campaign for the Protoss. The news did not go down well with gamers, especially as in both the original StarCraft and its expansion Brood Wars, there were campaigns for all 3 races. Not only did they still lack a release date, but they were also now faced with the prospect of having to buy 3 different games. It was Blizzard's first real PR challenge for StarCraft, and it would not be their last. Blizzard's Rob Pardo, however, explained the reason behind the decision, and it made perfect sense.